So this session in fundraising and partnerships development. Basically, for a number of years now, maybe 9 years at this point, I've been working on spearheading impactful initiatives of various kinds. I have tried many different kinds, and I have failed and I've succeeded. And so I was really excited to get invited to speak a little bit about some of the tips I've learned over time, because I wish I had had these tips when I was younger and just starting. And there's a learning curve in trying to figure many of these things out. And I didn't have that support. And so I was very excited for the opportunity to kind of share and push forward some of those thoughts and lessons I learned over time, so that you guys can all be more successful than I was, and maybe successful earlier. But to kind of give you some of the flavor of the work that I've done, it ended up being a great mix of working on other projects as well as my own, and working for others who really knew what they were doing, that I could leverage those experiences so I could also know what I was doing, which was good. So I did work for a nonprofit that was doing work in different parts of sub-Saharan Africa. I also did an internship with the World Food Program in Niger and worked on documentary projects in Eastern Africa and Southern Africa. I worked in New York at the UN, specifically for a Pacific Island country called Nauru. For those, maybe someone's on here from Nauru, but statistically very low likelihood, as it only 10,000 people in that country. But I worked for them at the UN, and that gave me some perspectives as well. I worked on an online university that was spearheaded in West Africa as well, and then the big project that I started working on that ended up being impactful was Impact Hub Accra, which is a social innovation center for aspiring entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs that are based in Ghana, who are trying to basically solve issues in their region. And that was an experience that over time gave me a lot of insight into the fundraising process, the partnership development process, and where most of the nuggets that I'll share with you have come from. And then right now I'm working on Impact Hub New York metropolitan area, which basically is supporting social innovators across the New York metropolitan area with events, programs, incubators, accelerators, to help people take their business off the ground. So I'm so used to talking about it, I've missed the chance to share, yes, that this is also something that we do a lot of, which is trying to help people get their impactful ideas off the ground. So without further ado, I'll just continue here. Let's see if I can. There we go. So I think it's really important to start at the beginning, and we're not going to spend too much time on this, but there's some questions that you should take into consideration about your idea. So is your idea coming from a position of strength? Do you really know a lot about your subject? Have you done work on this before? Did you study this in school? Is this something? Is there an issue that you're working on that you've lived yourself? Is this something that you know a lot about? And the reason why I mention this is because you don't have to jump in right away to start something that's a big commitment and activate your whole network. And if that's not the logical next step, don't forget you have time, you have a lifetime to make an impact, and you want to make sure that you are serving yourself and the people that you know in this process. And so that's a first question to ask. The second is, do I have a network to support this, right? So a network to support this means that, do you have people who can help you sleuth how to make the product or project impactful? Do you have people who are who believe in you doing this kind of work, who maybe would be able to financially support you or can just support you in other ways? And this is, this is not like make or break, but it's something to take into consideration. And this third question, I think, is really very important, maybe the most important. Am I committed to this impact, right? You know, to make a real impact in many kinds of issues, you have to be dedicated for the long term, because there's a learning curve in being able to do that. There's a growth curve. We all want change right away, and people need change right away. That's 100% for sure. But you have to be able to do this work without thinking at the same time when you hear something, that another opportunity, that you shouldn't have done that instead. You have to be able to commit and confirm that you're going to see this through, that you're going to try your best to give it a shot. Because otherwise, there are people who will go from one thing to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing. And as a result, they'll also diminish people's view of their credibility of actually being dedicated to see something through, such that they're actually diminishing, like you can diminish your prospects of unlocking the potential of your networks to help you if you are doing too much shifting over time. And then the fourth question, even if you have an idea that is good, is it the right time for you to start it? Or should you start by supporting someone else's idea, kind of get more experience, and maybe over time be able to shift into doing something yourself as well? Because there's a real opportunity sometimes to help someone out in a way that fits into your schedule, where they're very appreciative, you're learning a lot, and then they can even help you when you're ready to start your own idea, and you can do so in such a way that you're able to be more successful than you would otherwise. So I think those are always things to keep in mind. And no matter where you are in the startup curve, or how old you are, or how experienced you are, these are things to consider. So most importantly, though, the long-term career, right? If you want to be impactful, it takes a long time to make a big impact. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you'll make an impact right away, and we would be very happy for you if you can. That would be wonderful. But it takes a long time to really get to know the issues, to really get to know the networks of people who can affect an issue. And over time, too, the issue changes. The way to approach it and the way that we understand as communities how to affect problems changes. The kinds of solutions change because new products or new projects enter the market. And so what you can do as a change maker that can be really positive for you, both as an innovator and the long-term impact, is to think broadly about what your impact can be, the issues that you care a lot about, and see how over time, you may work on a startup, and you may cycle the startup so that someone else runs point on it. You might start a nonprofit. You might work on different angles of it. But if you're staying and you can understand how to position your work so that you're building on every experience, then your long-term ability towards making an impact improves greatly. So, if it's the health sector, for example, it takes a long time to get to know the health sector. If you can think of building a career towards a certain SDG or a certain area of impact, then over time, you will develop the networks and the opportunities to see over time the different sides of a problem that can help you become more effective over time. And the long term, both from a sustainability standpoint for the work that we do, and then our own careers towards being able to put that good energy towards and not lose the learnings from all the iterations of our work. That's something to consider. Oops, let's see. There we go. So obviously, your fundraising and your partnership opportunities depend a little bit on your structure. So you should always ask yourself, what is your best business case? If you have a product or service, will you be generating sales right away or much later? And many socially impactful people find that having a hybrid between either beginning as a nonprofit and becoming a for-profit, or starting as a for-profit and then eventually becoming a nonprofit to be sustainable. These are all things that you can do and be aware of. I think the emergence of the B Corp for people, which is not accessible everywhere, but as a double bottom line or triple bottom line opportunity to structure your company, can allow for both ends of the spectrum to be helpful. So for example, you can have for-profit activities while also being qualifying for different kinds of grant opportunities that may help your work become financially sustainable. And so you have to really consider, depending on the market that you're in, because it varies widely in the US, state by state, but then also country by country, whether it makes sense to be a for-profit, a nonprofit, or B Corp. But keep in mind that just by being one at one time does not mean you can't shift. It doesn't mean that you can't have a hybrid. I would let you know that the best way to find that out might be through trust law, which offers pro bono legal services for people to build their social enterprise. And so that's through Thomson Reuters Foundation, and it's free. So that can be very helpful for people being able to figure out what the best structure is for them. So we'll go into partnership tips. So I would say have a lot, normally I would tell people to have a lot of coffees. Now I guess virtual coffees, but the opportunity to meet with people who are within your industry and maybe will be potential funders or partners, right? A lot of partners or funders are interchangeable, but you want to get to know as early as you can these people, because asking for money from people or for partnerships does not come automatically most of the time. And it's okay to develop the relationships to be able to figure out over time for yourself when the right time is to ask them for partnership or funding, and also really to understand what it is that they can bring to the table and for what. So particularly a really great practice that I've seen entrepreneurs take is, even when they're just beginning, they will try to have lunch with people representing different kinds of banks, different kinds of corporations, different kinds of investment funds that are on their radar and maybe on their leads list in terms of potentially being ideal funding partners or collaborative partners. And they find someone on LinkedIn and they sit down with them to just get to know what they are doing. So they reach out and say, hey, I'm working on this impactful startup, but I saw that that you do this kind of work in XYZ company. I'd love to learn more about your work and how this, ask some questions that might be related to the work that you're doing. And I see that, and I've witnessed a lot of people have been very open to that and have been a basis for forming partnerships over time, which I think is a great practice. So just to widen the scope of your network specifically towards your work. The second thing, to show genuine passion. A lot of people like to play it cool when they meet potential partners, and they will try really hard to make it seem as if they have more resources and more money than they have. But what really gets people behind you is to show your genuine passion, which means, number one, pursue an idea that you're generally passionate about, that you really want to see solved, and that really speaks to you and who you are and who you want to be. The second thing is, don't feel as if you can't, show that passion. Don't feel as if you can't show if you're struggling. You can show them, because it will be the genuine passion that will help them to believe over time that you're the right person to do that work. And they'll want to support you, even if some of the other kinds of things that you've put together in terms of the packaging or not having everything in place, if they see and believe in you, then sometimes that can help clear some of the hurdles between you and collaboration or funding. The third thing, make a very clear and concise explanation for what you do. I can't tell you how important this is, where I've heard people for 20 or 30 minutes explain something, and at the end, I have no idea what they're trying to do, because they've mentioned so many things, and it's not clear the difference between what they want to do in the future, what they're doing now, what they like to do. You should be able to just in like a sentence or two be able to say it. And you should always be like, leading with that so that people right away get it. This is one of the major problems. No one knows, no one can understand how they can help you if they really don't know what you're doing. And you want them to be able to remember it, because if they remember it very concisely what you're doing, and if they have that content in the email of a few sentences that's always appearing of what you do, even if you put in like email signature, then it'll be easy for them to also share these ideas with other people, because they'll be able to recap what you're saying. And I think that, as simple as it is, I think that's really helpful. Next, don't ask for help right away. So to the extent that you can, if you can engage people and start developing relationships with people, and do so in a way where you don't feel as if you're bothering them or being like overbearing, then that is a better way to introduce yourself, as opposed to only reaching out to people when you are asking for money, which is just a no-brainer in some sense, right? You wouldn't want to do that to your friends, and that wouldn't be effective that way either. Of course, do your research, understand what's in the market already. You don't want to be in a partnership call and have people bringing up things. Oh, is there a question? Okay. Bringing up things that are happening that are related to your product that you don't know about, or opportunities and so forth. Update your audiences about your work. This is very important. So I make it a point every time that I am having an event at our hub, or I am working on a project, to make sure everyone who's in my network, everyone who's on my Facebook, everyone who's on my LinkedIn, know that I'm doing it. Whether that's posting like, oh, I'm so excited that we're doing X, Y, and Z, or I'm so excited that we're launching a certain project. I make sure that everyone knows, because not necessarily because people will, be a part of it, but everyone should be aware, so that when they hear of different opportunities or they read different opportunities, that they're thinking of you, that they're like, oh, okay, like, for me, like JP and supporting social entrepreneurs, I just saw this thing, I should send it to him. Or if they're in conversation with someone else, this is free advertising where they can be like, oh yeah, well, maybe you should talk to my friend, like JP, who is working on X, Y, and Z project. You can't expect immediate results for that. You just have to do it over time, because the benefit that it's hard to measure is just everyone being aware of the impact that you're trying to make, the things that you're trying to achieve, and what that resource pool, over time can show. Then, of course, response emails. So a lot of people feel a lot of pressure responding to a partnership email, because they feel as if they may not have all the answers. They feel as if it has to be really well articulated. They feel as if it has to be, above and beyond the call of emails. But it's actually okay to respond to emails right away and say, and respond to the things that you can respond to, and then say you'll continue to work on the things that you can't yet respond to. Just like keeping the momentum up between emails is really important. And if you don't feel like you can put a date as to when you can give them the output of part of an email, do not tell them that it's going to come tomorrow. This is like really essential. You just want to make sure whatever you're saying to them, that first of all, you keep the communication open, and you show that you're responsive. And then the second part is that you make sure that you're not setting yourself up to produce something that you can't produce or you won't be ready to produce. So don't play cards. So if you're struggling, you can tell people, like if I reach out to a partner and I say, we've been working really hard on developing this program, but we haven't been able to fund it, unfortunately, which means that we might not to be able to launch it on time or whatever else, then that's a good thing because they can maybe step up and help you out. It helps them over time to understand that the work is really meaningful to you and you're willing to sacrifice to make it happen. And there's a lot of value that comes from that because you will be first in mind for any of those opportunities because they know that you care, you're making a sacrifice, and there's a level of respect that often comes from that. And then, of course, be a part of a community of trust, an entrepreneurship community of some kind, a startup community. A lot of people find that starting up, their friends or families don't understand why they're trying to do what they're doing. Why aren't they just trying to get a normal job or work, for a major company? And there's a lot of pressure for people to do that, to pay their bills. There's a lot of people who have student loans. We all have student loans that we also, care about, are really important. And so being part of a community of people who are also going through the startup phase and trying to get an initiative off the ground and find different ways of surviving can be a very heartening experience that can help you build your confidence. And then you can learn from each other as well and share with each other different opportunities as they come their way. I think it's very important to do. And I think a lot of the intangibles there also come out. That happens between peer-to-peer interactions with people who are also in the space that you are. And then I would say bring on and celebrate partners and team. Don't forget about your partners. If you're partnering with an organization, don't feel like you can't celebrate it online and show appreciation for the work that they do and the commitment that they have to you and your work. And at the same time, your teammates too. I mean, there's no partnership or team, person who comes on that's perfect for what you're doing. For one, there's a culture that you have to develop within your team and within between you and your partners. And so it takes a while to have a rhythm that people can plug into that they understand. But you shouldn't, if you're working with people and they're not living up to your expectations, you can still celebrate and be thankful for the contribution that they are making as a way also to encourage them to dive deeper in and be thankful to be a part of it. And then I would say, lastly, don't feel like you can't give out roles within your organization. Some people try really hard to go it alone. But a partner can play a role in your organization in many different ways, right? And a partner who is working with an organization that you work with, there's really a broad spectrum here, but anyone can be an advisor to you, right? An advisory board, very different than having a proper board where you can give a role to someone who is contributing, who is trying to give you advice. And then this person can become even more of an advocate for you because they feel like they're actually a part of the institution, not outside your work, but they're part of your team trying to make a difference. And so you don't want to do so in a way that is not real, but certainly things like giving people an advisory board role can be something that's very flattering for them, can help progress your work, and also it can help in terms of being able to unlock more passion and good energy from people who care about you and the work that you do. So really quickly, I want to touch upon the types of funding. So obviously, if you're a for-profit, there are opportunities to take investment, but investment obviously comes for equity and people will own part of your company. And I think the leading practices on that front have shown over time that you don't want to touch that in the extremely early days unless you have a really good understanding of either how to do that or how your initiative will be able to return to the investors. We often see that people end up fighting early on over equity, who gets what, between team members and between funders, and many of these, when that happens, often there's a failure where it just doesn't move forward, and then everyone was fighting over nothing and no one got helped. And so there isn't enough time. That's like more than a session by itself. That's like a series. So, just to mention that, don't think of getting investment as maybe like the first step, unless it's a seed investment that is not really expecting a return. Then grants and donations. So if you are starting out as a nonprofit, or you're a B Corp in particular, and some for-profits can also get grants, but not donations. Then, this is like another key way to raise money. And there are a lot of grants that can be issued around the sustainable development goals that can be very helpful, and they can be specifically for you as a person or your organization. So a great example in the New York metro area is the David Prize, which gives $200,000 of unrestricted capital to people who are making a better and brighter future for New York City. And so, it's $200,000 with no specific dedication for how the money has to be spent. And so that's one of the more exciting examples. But you can imagine what $200,000 can do to an initiative. So, if you are thinking about an impactful initiative, then that's something that's in play for you. Whereas if you're just starting a company, like a normal company without a double bottom line or triple bottom line, then that's not a play for you. So there's that. Loans, I highly recommend not taking out any loans unless you are creating revenue already. That revenue is growing, and you feel really confident that you can repay it. If you're trying to make a difference, the last thing that you should be worried about is repaying a loan and going into debt. I mean, you're already trying very hard to make a difference and improve lives. Do not make your life more complicated by taking up a loan that would require best wishes to all come into fruition to be able to make it make sense. The next are corporate sponsorships. So a lot of corporations give sponsors to support startups that are socially impactful within their line of their industry. And the opportunities vary. If it's financial inclusion, it might be a bank that's giving it. It might come with, it might be money plus an opportunity for them to learn from you. And it might include as well the use of their products and your products and so forth. But that's something to look into as well. But then to be careful about, because we've recently seen that some corporations in particular have actually stolen from the startup initiatives that have been working in collaboration with them. And so you do want to be careful, and I want to make sure that you know about that. But that is another kind of funding that can be very helpful, and especially if the company is aligned and there's trust, their branding can also help you in reaching audiences as well, especially in like the financial inclusion of being able to help people access capital, because obviously those capital partners come with a lot of credibility and networks. Then in-kind help and volunteerism. So a lot of again, like if you're a social enterprise or if you're a socially impactful initiative, you can, there's a lot of in-kind help that you can leverage that you couldn't otherwise. And so that means that a company may be able to support you with office space, which can help you make more progress with your team. They can maybe help you with a certain amount of freebies within their product that might be in a tangent to yours. They might be able to offer pro bono legal help. As I mentioned, Thomson Reuters Foundation does through trust law. They might be able to help you in a variety of ways. As a socially impactful startup, you should always be looking at the different areas of work you have and which companies might be able to support that for free. Sometimes if you email a company and say, hey, we want to use your platform. Like suppose the platform is like a management platform, like Trello or Mondays or something like this. And you need a higher level, you need a premium account. You can always reach out and email to these people and say like, hey, you know, we're starting up. This is a socially impactful idea. We can't really afford this product at this time, but it would really help us. Often you'll find that they'll either be able to give you discounts or they'll be able to do things in kind, and that, you know, that can happen in any area of your work. And so I recommend no harm in trying. And again, this is like a great networking exercise where now you're also informing more people about the work that you're doing, and you have a chance to, you know, continue to practice your pitch as well too. And then with volunteerism, the reason I wanted to mention volunteerism is because there are a few challenges that you may have. Now, of course, if you're a for-profit, you cannot have volunteerism legally, right? Like everyone has to get paid who's working for you because you are, you know, you're set up towards being fully profit-driven, and there's equity involved, and there are limitations to, in many places, how a volunteer can work on a for-profit initiative. But if you're a B Corp, or if you are a nonprofit, then those rules change as well. And of course, again, changing from country to country and state to state, and sometimes, well, I don't know if city to state, but definitely state to state within the US. It's really important to be able to stay within the law and make sure that your volunteerism is legal. And on that note, and the reason why volunteerism does have these confines too, is that you really should be, to the best of your ability, you know, compensating people for their time. You know, especially a lot of young people end up volunteering or interning. I'm sure many of you have done free internships. I've done plenty of free internships as a young person myself. But there's research now that's been showing that people who work for free at a young age are negatively impacted towards their full financial trajectory in life. And so we want to make sure that, to the extent, you know, even if it's thanking volunteers, you know, for taking, you know, by taking them out for dinner every now and then and doing other things, that, you know, you keep in mind that, you know, to the extent that you're able to help the people who are helping you, you know, it should be within your values to do so. Okay, so now the fundraising tips, which is important. So my first one for impactful initiatives is to adopt the SDG framework and measure impact. And the reason why I think this is so important is because we know that there's so much movement around the SDGs, not just with nation states signing on and so forth, but a lot of corporations and a lot of impact investment funds have all adopted the SDGs. And at the very least, we'll know what the SDGs are. And by giving this framework within your work, then you are aligning yourself with a lot of impactful work that's going to be done. You are aligning yourself for a framing that can help with applying for grants and opportunities for funding. And of course, it gives you a framework for the measurement of your impacts, which is incredibly important. You have to be able to describe whether you're filling out a grant application or you are filling out an opportunity for a sponsorship, or you are reaching out to people that you think should be giving you money of various kinds. You have to be able to say how your work actually impacts people's lives if you want to use that as an angle for raising money. And so coming up with a robust plan for how you're going to do that, and, you know, count properly all the people who will be impacted by your work, and what that, obviously depending upon what your angle is, but that more than anything will both impress people and they will need it from you. So the earlier you get on board to try and learn how to do that, the better. And you can start small with measurement and you can grow it over time. And you can seek out advice, but that's very important. And I would say take time, be prepared to weather the storm. It can take a long time to develop funding relationships because they are relationships. So people getting to know you. And actually, so the reason why this is a session for both partnerships and fundraising is because most funding relationships will start as partnerships where you're getting to know each other over a period of time. They're learning about what you're passionate about, what your work is, what your outputs have been, what your lessons have been, and you're learning from them what they're actually interested in funding, which angles within your work are the most applicable, and you're thinking about how you can take the work that you're doing already and frame it in different ways to meet opportunities as they come to you. And so a lot of people come up with plans saying that they're going to raise, $1 million in the next year, or I'm going to raise $300,000 in this 6 months, and then afterwards I'm going to raise this much money. And the fact is that sometimes that works out, and most of the time it doesn't. And you shouldn't be hard on yourself for not being able to do that right away, because it is very hard to do. But then also the opportunity to raise funding over time is again, like a career opportunity where you may end up changing initiatives over time, but what's really important is that you're building strong relationships, because over time you'll be able to draw from those. The next, I'd say, crowdfunding campaign. So crowdfunding campaigns are not very helpful these days for raising money or massive amounts of money, but they are very helpful for creating awareness about the work that you're doing and why you're doing it. And so it's a really great promotional exercise where if you go through the process of the crowdfunding campaign, the elements of creating the promo video for your work and different ways that people can plug in, what they get in return, then you can share that with a lot of your partners, prospective partners, people within your network, your family, and they can see and touch and get closer to the work that you're actually doing. And like this whole group of people, think about all the people that you know, like the power of being able to even create that awareness more fully. And that's what a crowdfunding campaign really is. Now, you might make a lot of money from a crowdfunding campaign if you have a great product, story, or idea. So, I mean, that's still on the table, but most of them at this point, there's a little bit of a crowdfunding fatigue from actually like fundraising perspective, but it doesn't mean that it's not worth you doing. Over time, there can be a lot of value there. And then it's to let people know what you're raising money for. So, people ask you how you are, and you are constantly in touch with a lot of people. Make sure they know you're raising money and what you're raising money for. So outside of a crowdfunding campaign you may do once, keep people updated and aware of your needs as an organization, and be honest and genuine as you're doing it, without being abrasive. Don't push people to ask you for money. When we were raising money, we started our hub in Accra, Ghana, and there were times when in Ghana you have to pay rent for offices a year in advance, like an entire year of rent in advance, which is a common practice. And we had rent to pay of $45,000, and we were a social impact organization. So most of what we were doing to support people was free or near free, because we wanted to make sure it was inclusive and open for everybody. And so a lot of our work was funded through different kinds of sponsorships. And we, in the early days, had a few pinches where we wouldn't know if we'd be able to stay open. We didn't know if we'd be able to come up with the money for our rent, and if we just get closed down. And so at those times, we definitely activated reaching out to people within our networks to say, like, hey, to continue doing our work, we need to raise $30,000 or $20,000 or whatever the whole was, in the next few weeks. And even people who weren't like direct funders, or weren't we didn't think would give us directly the money, they spread the word to people who ended up doing that, which helped us to survive. And so we were very thankful for that. And so just to keep people aware and make sure that you're not reaching out of the blue and coming up with those kinds of emails, which we did, big mistake. that's good. Show your passion, lean in. For an impactful initiative to work, sometimes you have to work twice as hard as you would if you were like a normal enterprise, right? Especially if you're trying to be supportive of a specific community, you're trying to make everything as inclusive as possible, and that a price for service or a price for product, by raising that price, you are going to push some people outside of the opportunity to engage with it. So you really have to work hard and be dedicated. You have to show your passion, and in that sense, it's an opportunity for you to become the champion that you envision should be there, because in that process, and you really do earn your stripes, I guess, as a social innovator, to really have a strong narrative and to have a focus that people can be inspired about. Then I'd say, I know I'm giving like a lot of advice, but I'm hoping we can just get through these last points, and then maybe there's time for question. Obviously, to build a diverse team with good energy, relevant experience, and networks. You can add people onto your team. It does not have to be just you. Those people can have there can be a sliding scale for how much time that they give. But anyone who's going to be a funding partner is going to look on who's on your team. They have to believe in the team and the energy between the teammates. They have to look at your experience or someone's experience on the team and say, this is relevant for this work to be done. And it has to not look as though it's not going to add up, right? So if you have 3 teammates who are all working at McKinsey, and they're working 100 hours a week, they're not going to be able to make a meaningful amount of impact on your work. So that to keep in mind for sure. Again, like, form a strong advisory board. Advisors don't get to change the way that your organization or company run. They're there to give you input. And by having an advisory board can help you to help bring on partners who are enthusiastic about your work, and to continue to encourage them to be more involved. It can give you the opportunity to show the world on your website all the people who are within your network who are helping you in various ways and who have that relevant experience. And it can be an opportunity to really source great ideas and insights, giving people more of a reason to support your work over time and share your work, building credibility for the work that you do. Because especially if you're young and you're starting up, you have all the passion, but you may lack some of the experience. And so advisory board helps you fill that gap and show people that you're drawing experiences from the right people. Seek advice from peers and institutions you eventually want to, I think that's work with. So obviously, if you're part of an entrepreneurship network, you can ask people, how did they fund their initiatives, especially if they're in your sector. I mean, it's hard for me to give broad, specialized advice when there's so many different SDGs and angles that people could take in so many different markets. But people who are within your sphere and scope, who maybe are not your direct competitors, but are in your industry, can give you really fascinating advice for how they found a way to raise money in their early days, and how they are tackling various issues that come up with their organization that can be applicable for you. And you might have something to share with them too that can help them along as well. Or you may end up being a service provider for them, depending on what you're open to doing. And so there's that. And then you can also pull aside, if you think someone from a corporation or from an impact fund can give you advice because you don't really understand from what you can find online about their company and how the plug can be built, either to theirs or to others in their industry. I would assume that if you reach out to 5 people, you probably get a response from 1 or 2. who would be happy to have a brief call with you, like 15, 20 minutes, to talk about, you know, like what the process might be to get funding from their institution or an institution like theirs, right? And so many of them are happy to do it because, you know, impact funders, they're there to deploy funding, right? So they want to help people understand how they can do that. So a lot of people try not to reach out, or they feel like, you know, they can't add these people on LinkedIn or reach out to them because either they're not ready, or, you know, they're embarrassed to do so, because a lot of social innovators are very humble people, you know, which is a wonderful attribute, but you know, you have to overcome some of those self-made barriers to be able to engage with all these actors, and people feel pressure, but you can do it. Then cast a wide net and be flexible. So you may go to a potential funder and you might be pitching a certain project to them, and they might be able they may be trying to tell you within your discussion with them that they have an opportunity that's different that you can be a part of. And so when you go into those meetings, there's a certain amount of flexibility that pays off if you're willing to listen to what it is that they're really trying to do, and not just trying to talk about what you're trying to do. And you might find that there are opportunities for funding that, you know, that might be a bit of a compromise to start with, but really get your foot in the door and give you an opportunity to then leverage that experience to go to other potential funders or other potential partners and say, hey, we're doing this one thing with, you know, BNP Paribas or something like this. Are you interested in doing this with us? We'd love to, you know, work on this other angle to support people, or to solve a certain issue. And then I would say beat expectations of what can be done for the money. There's nothing more disappointing, I think, for funders, for them to hear or get the impression that they gave you money for something and it still didn't solve the problem that you said it was going to solve. Which means that being transparent, first of all, making real calculations about the money that you need, but then also working really hard to make sure that that money goes to all the right places, right? You don't want to say like, oh, you know, this was supposed to support this many, you know, shoes for you know, people who are, you know, in a refugee community or something like this, and then for them to find out that, oh, well, some of it had to go towards, you know, some of the fees regarding being able to do that kind of work, or the transportation for the shoes, whatever. So whatever the commitment is, try to beat it. Let them be excited. If they were able to fund you for a specific opportunity, and that they see that, you know, it was even, they were able to make even more of an impact with the money that they gave you, then that's a great start, where you're showing that you're a good partner to be able to do this work. So that's it from my slides. I'm happy to take any questions if people have any questions, or if there's any way I can help in general.
Wow, John Paul, thank you so much. You know, as the Director of Global Operations for Immune Impact, and us being a startup nonprofit ourselves, I was taking notes on your presentation. Thank you very much. If any of our students would have any questions, either raise your hand or drop the questions in the chat. Just one question that I have that I thought might be applicable to a lot of people. So asking for money, not natural for a lot of people. And asking for help isn't always natural. And especially when you're going after some quote unquote big fish that you might feel uncomfortable about reaching out to. But in my experience at Immune Impact is that people kind of, you know, these big fish want to hear these good stories, want to hear these things. Do you have any advice to us on how to make the ask, how to, you know, get that confidence to go out there?
Yeah, well, the best way to always develop confidence is to be prepared, right? So if you have a good deck behind you that you've developed, that you feel like explains very thoroughly the reason for the funding, what's going to be done with it, and you have all the measurement plans in place and so forth, then, think of yourself as representing the people who need the impact that you're trying to make, right? You're not doing it, for Cody or for JP. You're doing it for these people that you're supporting through this impact that's really important. And so sometimes it's easier for people to differentiate between like, oh, I'm asking this for myself personally, versus like, this is like something that has to happen. This is a good that we're all responsible for making. And so in doing that, I think that's, that can be helpful. But then also, when you're asking people personally for funding, if they're within your network, I think this is where it becomes the most challenging from the heartstrings. So for example, like I've asked, friends and friends of family for money for certain initiatives that we were doing at our Hub and Ghana, right? And I always felt, very stressed. I mean, I'm even stressed just thinking about asking them. And I would say, know your audience, right? So if you really think that you'd be burning a bridge by even asking, then maybe the best way for them to know that you're raising funding is through the announcements on your platforms that they might be following. Or, depending on who it is, if it's a relationship from like a family relationship, have someone else, kind of gauge what their interest would be before you're asking them. So you can preserve that relationship and not drive yourself, mad either.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah. If there are no other questions, I have a lot. Do any of the students have a question? If so, maybe raise your hand or drop it in the chat. Oh, Shoaib, you can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Hi, yeah, Shoaib. So I was wondering on like your idea with building a team. How would I do that as a student? Like, would I reach out to other students who are interested in making the same impact as I am? And like a follow-up question for that is, how do I not sacrifice my vision for the idea when I make a team?
Yeah, so I'll answer the first one first, the second question first, which is that when you're reaching out to these people to begin with, whoever they might be, whether they're students or if you are, reaching out to people that from other facets of life to be a part of it. If you're concerned about the idea, like you really want to do this one thing with the work, and then you're afraid it's going to go everywhere, then just be very clear when you're reaching out what the idea is, right? So by them signing up, they are fully aware of what the plan is, like loosely, to make the impact and so forth. And so, if they are trying to get off that train of thought, then you can be like, well, hey, I thought we were in agreement that this was this was going to be the purpose of the work and so forth. Because it's true that there's always there can be people who will move the idea around, and then suddenly it can be something that wasn't. I mean, so the difference between it not being something that you were initially thinking of versus something that doesn't satisfy like what's inside of you, what you're inspired to make a difference of. And so, yeah, I just recommend being very clear from the beginning.
Okay.
Secondly, for students, obviously, depending on the initiative, you want to be able to vet the people who are coming in to work with you in some way, because if people bring the wrong energy, then you're setting yourself up for a failure. Or if you are if you are getting 10 people who are trying to work on something and they all have the exact same skill, then that doesn't really help. So you don't want to make it. You want to be able to do things purposefully and bring the pieces together. So I would say feel free to reach out to students if you think students are the right people to help you in the work, but maybe put some guidelines around like, hey, we're looking for a few people who are going to be interested in design, a few people who are going to be interested in organization, a few people who are like techie oriented. And so you're already, and maybe like say like a few people. So you're already setting the expectation that, that you're going to be able to work with a certain amount of people and they have a purpose. Obviously, depending what it is that you're working on, then you can invite people to be a part of the movement. Because some initiatives, the more the merrier, right?
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Do any other students have a question? If so, could you raise your hand? I've got one more that I hope isn't too in the weeds for you, JP. So you recommended having the data and having these metrics, figured out before we make these asks and before we approach potential partners and funders. At Immune Impact, I've had to scour the internet and look up all different kinds of things, and there's a lot of information out there. Sometimes it's contradictory. Can you recommend any resources to our students for places to go to give them a starting point on how to develop these metrics, etc.?
Yeah, so I mean, the first resource that I'd recommend is going to the UN's webpage for the Sustainable Development Goals, because within that they have listings of resources that can help you understand how to measure, but then they also break down the SDGs to all the resolution targets within it. And so I think that's the best overall example. And then I think as far as the timing of knowing how to measure. So in the beginning, you just need a broad idea of how you're going to measure. If you're talking about starting to engage people, like potential partners for relationship building, right? And you're at the initiative stage of being like, I really want to make an impact in this direction, and you're having a conversation where you're learning and they're learning more about you. It's when you're asking for funding that you really need to have a robust plan, and the earlier the better. And so in that sense, you don't have to, to the best of your ability, you should know who you're trying to impact as you're engaging these people, and have an idea of how you want to measure that, and like, what is the matrix of success? Is it the people who are using the product? Is it the people who are impacted by the product? Is it a combination of the two, or is it specifically that the product itself is impactful because it's sustainable? And so actually it's a number of those products that you sell, because it means that there's buying your product that's sustainable as opposed to another product that may not be. And so that much you should know and have in mind in advance, and know which SDG you're trying to solve. And over time, like you will probably want to hire someone to come up with a full, robust impact measurement plan, or have someone from your team really focus on doing that for an amount of time, with feedback from people within your networks who understand the problem very well.
Awesome, thank you. That's very helpful, I think, to all of us. It's past due. This session is supposed to be over, and for our Spanish speakers, your guys' social hour is starting right now. But I want to thank everybody who attended today, our admin staff, our wonderful interpreters. You guys are fantastic. And most of all, John Paul, thank you so much for joining us today, sharing your words of wisdom, and because I know you've earned this wisdom through many years and lots of experience, and this stuff, you can only learn in some ways by experiencing it. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and thank you, everyone. And thank you also the interpreters. I hope I was speaking okay. And for all the aspiring entrepreneurs, or maybe you're entrepreneurs already, I just wish you the best of luck and all the success in the world. And feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn if there's anything I can do to help, and I'm happy to do that too.
All right, thank you, everybody. I'm going to shut this meeting down now, but thank you for joining. Take care.